What would happen if all countries would open their borders? The more developed countries will be flooded with people from less developed countries. There would be chaos and violence. Would that also include opening up borders so people could leave? This would be bad for Cuba and North Korea. Anarchy. In a fairy tale, great things would happen. Cultures would intermingle and prejudice and poverty would diminish. In the real world, tribalism would still prevail. Humans as a whole at this point in our evolutionary path aren't capable of blending cultures well. Wish they were, but it's not a reality at the moment in our timeline. Maybe one day, thousands of years down the road. That is if we make it that far as a species. Chaos and the collapse of civilization. Uneducated people with bad morals, hatred of women, LGBT, etc. would flock in droves to other countries that would provide better lives for them and ruin those countries. World progress would slow, and hate and intolerance would increase worldwide as their populations overwhelm due to the fact people from those countries usually traditionally have lots of children due to high infant mortality rates, which wouldn't be an issue in a richer country that provides basic levels of care for its citizens. It depends on what the governments around the world look like during that. Are there still countries? Is everything the same as now, just open borders? If so, I imagine wars would break out over access and control of resources. To be honest, it would be eye-opening to see what countries would be the most popular or least popular based on how many people choose to go or leave said country. I would assume a lot of weebs from all around the world would flood Japan. Cory boos and K-pop stans would flood South Korea. Nations such as China, or Russia, or North Korea, who always brags about how great their country is, would probably have more people leaving their borders than entering, would be my guess. There will be barely any women left in India would also be one of my guesses, judging the news that comes out of there. Depends on how it's done. Ideal scenario if people are not evil. Mafia, cartels, gangs, terrorists, and human traffickers will abuse this to he Roman too. Kids these days only check the pros but ignore the cons of things. Venezuela could finish emptying their prisons. The destruction of most existing cultures, massive resource constraints on a global scale, the abolition of most forms of democratic government, as demographic instability would mean increasingly populist governments gain control. Just a few things. It wouldn't be good, even for the people wanting a better life. Look at the USA from its founding until 1917 and 1924 when it started closing its borders. It's deep and nuanced, but the borders were more or less totally open for like 150 years. Canada. If internal migration is any indicator, huge slums around large cities, overburdened infrastructure, and high rates of crime. Some places could even experience civil wars or revolutions depending on how the original residents take the new reality. On the plus side, I think it would greatly speed up world GDP growth as more people would have access to better institutions. As per Darren Asimoglu's work, on balance, it would be great. The experiment has been done in various ways across the centuries. Open borders within most of Europe has not caused any particular uptick in violence or the complete emptying out of poor nations into richer. Obviously, the US had essentially open borders from before its founding till the early 1900s, and functionally until the 1990s. It only made the US stronger. So, picture what happens in cities that host the Olympics. There's a reason they prepare years in advance. Now imagine that, but in every major city. It's super important to understand that being a homeless person in the USA still puts you at a higher standard of living than much of Earth's population experiences. Probably 90 of third world countries' population would try to move to first world nations because showing up with nothing is an improvement. Bear in mind that open borders would not affect the difficulty of reaching another country's borders. Even if every border between, say, Afghanistan and France became an open border, leaving Afghanistan to go to France with no motor vehicle, very little money, and no friends along the way would still be a daunting proposition. Going from Afghanistan to Pakistan less so. Edit. Okay. Crossing the national borders between Afghanistan and France would be easier, but there would still be plenty of difficulty within each country's borders. People would leave the poor countries to go to the rich countries, and the rich countries would become poor. Would be very hard to enforce laws when criminals can move to countries that don't have police control.